Be about 6 years old. Just began sleeping in my own room since we were able to move into a house that allowed for us to have our own room. Excited cause I felt like I was finally a big boy who can live on his own. First night feel hot, like very hot. Live in Texas so heat was not a rare issue, but this felt unbearable. Almost to the point of not being able to breathe. Just go to the living room to sleep and forget about it. Next night the heat returns. But this time feels less warm and more mean. My 6-year-old mind didn't know what malice was, so that was the best way I could describe it. Made me want to leave my room, but I couldn't. Something made me so scared that it got me frozen. Tried yelling for my dad, but almost like those dreams where you yell and nothing comes out, same thing here, but I knew I wasn't dreaming. Now here is where my memory gets fuzzy, so I am going to go off what my parents remember. Next day I go to my dad and tell him about the past 2 nights. He chalks it up to me being scared all alone in the dark. He decides that day to put a night light in my room and hopefully that helps. Comes into my room that night like he usually does, and this time he reads me a bedtime story, all in hopes to calm me down. He leaves and seemingly that's the end of it. Fast forward to about 2 a.m. or so. The absolute worst blood-curdling scream he has ever heard comes from my room. So loud it actually wakes up the neighbors. My dad is not a fast man, but that day you swear he had super speed the way he was able to get to my room so fast. Our rooms were on opposite sides of the house. Dad basically breaks the door off its hinges and sees me on the floor crying and cowering for my life in a corner of the room. My dad goes on to explain how as soon as he went in he felt this pure aura of just anger and malice. Dad picks me up and bolts out of that room. Sleep with them for the next 2 nights. My dad doesn't talk about the room for those days, not wanting to scare me. Tells me that after that he talked to my mom about it. My mom, being religious and an avid believer in the paranormal, tells my dad it has to be some sort of spirit haunting the room. My dad, still skeptical, decides to say fuck it and sleep in the room himself, just to make sure he didn't just imagine it, since he was still groggy and half awake when he came into my room that night. Later that night he tucks me in with my mother and goes to sleep in my room. Next day we find him sleeping in the living room. Mom asks Dad what happened. He begins to go on this huge tirade about how the room made him feel nauseous and almost depressed. Said that the heat itself was bad, but that around 2 a.m. he felt almost suicidal, to the point of thinking to just turn on the car's gas and let it be. My father is not a depressive, nor has he ever had a history of such. Tells my mom that something is definitely fucked up about that room. My sister, she was about 17, hears my dad say this and, as most teenagers do, tend to not believe him, so she says she'll sleep in the room, to much of my mother's dismay. Later that night my sister goes into my room. About 2 a.m. same as last night and same as 2 nights before. She bolts out of my room. And I don't mean run, I mean she almost leaped out of the room with how fast she tried to leave. My mother tells me that she even caught my sister trying to leave the house entirely in a mess of sweat and tears. Later that night, after my sister calms down, my parents ask her what exactly happened. She goes on to explain that she had been touched by something, and not just the normal grazing feel or strange sensation, she means grabbed and groped. She explains that while the room itself became scorching hot, the touches felt like they were setting her on fire, burning her. She said that the pain may have been one thing, but the sheer feeling of anguish and despair she felt while it happened was on an entirely different level. She explained it as the feeling you get when someone you love dies, and you have to see their body in a casket. Of course, to my mother and father, they knew what that felt like, losing a parent and grandparent respectively. My mom finally tells us she wants to sleep in that room. Dad tells her to not and just call a priest or something. Mom says she wants to confirm it herself. Part of me thinks she just wanted to have a piece of the paranormal pie. That night we all go to bed and my mom goes into my room. Same verse as the first, second and third. 2 a.m. and shit hits the fan. This time we hear crashing and screaming. Dad once again runs into the room. Tells me to stay in their bed until he comes back. Can hear sister running to my room as well. Can hear talking but, not real words can be made out. Later that day my mom explains what happened. 3/ Don't know if anyone is reading but, it feels good to get this off my chest. Mom tells my dad she felt the exact same malice and anger that he and my sister did. Only this time she could feel a direction. She could tell where it was. She continued to explain that she just knew where it was sitting, or standing, or whatever. At first she left it be since it wasn't really trying to harm her. But, then she told my dad something, and later to me, which to this day has never left our minds. She begins to tell my dad, that not only was it there, but it spoke to her. Not the same quiet whisper my sister got, but full audible speech. She says the spirit began talking about my father first. Saying things like he only chose you cause you were the easiest, he only chose you because he needed a rebound, only reason he stayed was the kid. For context, I am my father's only child. My sisters were from a different marriage, etc. etc. She then began saying the spirit talked about me, how he'll end up being buried by you. He'll never amount to anything because you'll never let him, etc. And this went on for maybe 30 minutes until she just lost it. My sister felt fear, my dad felt depression, I felt malice, my mother felt pure unfiltered anger. My mom isn't someone known for her temper, but when she is mad she's terrifying. This was one of those moments. Mom finally told my dad to call a priest to bless the house and exorcise any bad juju. Call a family friend who was also the priest at our local church. Priest comes in and immediately asks, "Can you show me your son's room?" My mother and my father never told him about the room. When asked why he wanted to start there first, the priest just said, "I think that's where I'm needed the most." My mom allows him in and leads him into my room. Priest stops. Almost frozen. Tells my parents that there is something evil. Something cruel in here. And as he said that, he turns to the corner of the room. Same place my mother told my dad she felt it. Priest points and says there, that is where it lives. It's no spirit, it's a demon. I don't know what brought it here nor why it resides in this exact area, but something about this land attracts it. Priest, as he says this, begins to set crosses and candles around the room, grabbing his holy water. Begins to pray and spread the holy water. As he's doing that, the whole room goes hot. Hotter than anyone has ever felt it. To the point where we were all drenched in sweat as this happened. Priest is praying and spraying at this point. Looked like a movie almost. The whole time it felt like something was struggling, clinging to the room. And then after 30 minutes it stopped. No more heaviness. Temperature went the same as the rest of the house. Everything felt normal. Priest then says that it decided to go, it knew that it couldn't stay. Fast forward about 2 years and my father and priest friend decided to discuss what exactly happened. Priest begins to explain that for some reason the demon felt an abnormal amount of attraction to that one area, that one bit of the house that was full of malice and anger. Says he researched the house and from what he knows no one was ever killed there, or Indian burial ground or any of that crap. Just something there fed its evil nature. Tells my dad that it's not unheard of for a demon to just choose a random house, and especially a random room, but, when it does happen it happens for a reason. To this day neither the priest nor my parents know why. Now I'm 23 and to this day I still think about that room. I still sleep in it sometimes when I visit my folks, but nothing ever feels off. If you see it, it's just a normal everyday middle class room. I have had some paranormal experiences here and there since then, some bigger and more unexplainable than others. But nothing ever tops this one, nothing ever gets close to this one. It has always stuck in my mind. It is possibly why I still believe in the paranormal at all. Just the amount of evidence I witnessed firsthand those 2 weeks or so was enough to tell me this isn't all superstition and voodoo. I still wonder sometimes what it was that attracted that thing to my room. Not my parents. Not my sisters. Nowhere in the house. But my room. Maybe demons are just more attracted by toddlers since they are more innocent and easier to corrupt. I'm not theologian, so I can't say for sure. All I know is that in some sick way, I hope I can encounter something like that again. Thanks for reading. I'll probably be back with other stories I've encountered, but I wanted to write this one down because it's always stuck to me. Hello /Demon Room Anon here. I thought it would be fun to share another one of my strange encounters with the paranormal since the last story I shared was well received. Luckily this time I won't have to rely on second-hand memories from my folks because this one is very recent. Be me 22 and out on the streets with my 2 brothers. We will call one Lego and Art to not reveal too much. We usually just go out on the town, nowhere in particular, just driving, listening to music. Typical Texan Dust Bowl town kinda shit. We sometimes drive for 30 minutes, sometimes the entire night. This was one of our entire night drives. We were driving down toward one of the Walmarts in town since Lego began saying he was very thirsty and wanted some soda. Art and I decided that a drink would be a good idea since the power of suggestion and all that jazz. As we finish up shopping for our drinks, I suddenly get this overwhelming feeling to go to our local lake. I don't particularly care for the lake in our town, but this time I just couldn't shake the feeling of going. Keep in mind at this point it was close to 2 a.m. and the only way into the lake was a semi-secret road that goes into the back lot of the lake past the security guards. Lego and Art are both perplexed by my sudden infatuation with the lake, but we've done dumber things before, so we decide that it's a fine enough idea. Get to the lake and drive into the back road and we park near the water. Our lake is not exactly a sight to behold, but on this night it was glowing radiantly. Not literally, but something made me feel almost attached to it. As the night goes on, Lego and Art begin talking about video games, cracking jokes and drinking the sodas we bought. But, for some odd reason, I could not shake the feeling that the lake needed me there. Or maybe not so much the lake, but something. Something strong, yet melancholy. Suddenly this rush of emotions came to me. Almost like a weird mix of sympathy and somber. Not enough to make someone cry, but enough to make you feel like you just lost something important. I start asking the guys if they also feel it. For context, Lego and Art both know about my history with the paranormal and have had some history themselves with it. Both shake their heads and look at me with a puzzled look. Lego begins to ask, "Are you okay, dude? I mean, it's kinda late, so maybe you're just tired." "Yeah, maybe we should go home," Art began to mumble. Art is not a very loud talker, so many of his statements sound like quiet whispers or mumbles. "I don't think I should go just yet," I said to them both. "Something is just keeping me here, and I don't think it wants us to leave." As soon as those words leave my mouth, it gets cold. Freezing cold. Keep in mind this is the middle of summer, is southern Texas, not exactly known for our cold fronts. This drop in temperature caught all of us off guard and we started wondering just what exactly happened. As we begin to start packing up into the car for warmth, Lego says, "Huh. No. Art and I both looked at him and I said we didn't say anything. Lego looks at us weirdly and says he heard someone ask him if he has a jacket, and it sounded a lot like Art. At this point I knew we probably shouldn't have stayed, but being stupid college kids we did, and not only did we stay, we got out of the car again. Now the temperature has begun to drop even more. Hits what felt like 60 to 50 degrees, to us Texans that's pretty cold. I do the dumb ghost show thing where I ask, is someone there? No response, no shit. I tell Art that maybe it is time to go. The feeling of needing to stay had finally subsided and I was able to think rationally. As Art begins to turn the ignition, we suddenly all at the same time hear, "Please, don't leave again." I can actually feel my fucking back tense up just remembering how it sounded. It was so calming in tone, but anyone with 2 brain cells could tell that it was anything but benevolent. Yet this feeling wasn't malicious, it wasn't demonic, it wasn't full of rage. It was just sorrow, pure fucking depression. The voice said a few more things. I can barely remember them. But what I do remember is that every time it said something without fail I truly felt more and more miserable. Art and Lego felt the exact same way and we all voiced our concern. Lego was the first one to truly say anything. "Hey, you guys feel shitty, like sad?" Yet Art said with almost a whimper, "I feel it too," trying my damnest to not let the shakiness in my voice bleed through. After about 4 minutes the voice stopped. But Art just stared out. "Hey, you okay, dude?" I asked him, snapping my fingers in his face. He didn't blink, didn't talk, hell it didn't even look like he was fucking breathing. "Hey. Art. You here with us, man? We have to be with her, she's really sad, man." "What?" Lego asked, almost irritated. Before we could ask any more questions, the car started to move. Not because of any spooky skeletons. Not because of spirits. Because Art was slowly driving us into the lake. I kept yelling at the top of my voice, "Art. You're driving forward, you fucking idiot." "Hey." But it's like he wasn't there anymore. Lego tried slapping him, which wasn't very effective from the back seat. I tried to honk the horn in vain to see if that would startle him back to reality. Nothing worked. Here we are in this car driving towards the fucking lake. Finally Lego and I just went for a Hail Mary and got out of the car. We opened the driver's seat door and yanked Art off the seat. Art is not a strong guy, he is a very skinny and lanky dude. Never able to lift more than say 20 pounds or 9.1 kilos for you Eurofolk. But he had the gripping strength of a gorilla this night. Took Lego and I everything we had to rip him out of the car. Luckily we were able to in the end, and Art is still with us today. Can't say the same for his poor car though, lost in the lake forever. After we gathered ourselves we still had to wonder what's going on with Art. His eyes are still glazed over and he's mumbling something to himself. I've asked him after the fact, but he doesn't remember himself what he was mumbling. All it seemed he could focus on was that damn lake. So finally, as any sensible person does, I grabbed my tiny Bible my mom used to make me carry. It was one of those pocket-sized mini Bibles you find at the Dollar Tree. Of course, me thinking he's Mr. Ghostbuster decided to try and exorcise the spirit. I run to the lake and start yelling all the crap I heard on TV. "Power of Christ compels you, you are not welcome in this realm, pass on to the next life." That kinda crap. I did all this in hopes that whatever was out there didn't decide to just swallow my soul. After what seemed like an hour, probably 10 minutes, the cold feeling started to go away. Temperature felt normal, wind felt normal, felt like another Texas summer night. Art finally snapped out of his trance and went into another set of mind. Anger, his car is now in the lake. After we explained what had happened to him, he seemingly was able to calm down just enough to not try to kill us intentionally. We all sat down and drank our last soda, almost feeling like we just won some big battle. Didn't take us long before we started making jokes about the entire situation. Call it a coping mechanism. As we now realized we had to walk home, this was before Uber really became a thing in our city. We all decided to just stay at the tourist trap hotel for the night. As we laid up in the hotel for the night, we began speaking about what exactly happened. As expected, we didn't exactly know how to make heads or tails of it. As we were starting to just say fuck it and go to bed, Art finally spoke up. "Hey, I still haven't told you guys what I saw, right?" The room got eerily quiet. Enough to hear a fly breathe. "No, go on dude, what did you see?" What made what he began saying more poignant is that he had begun speaking louder than I had ever had him speak. Not yelling, mind you, but normal volume for a human being. "It's not so much what I saw, it was more who." "And who was it?" Lego asked. "My mom," Art said. To give context, Art's mom had died a number of years ago at that lake due to apparent heart failure. Art never really showed how shaken up that made him, but you could tell that it wasn't something he easily forgot. He continued, "She kept telling me how she was lonely, that she missed me and wanted me to go with her. She even said I could take you guys, but when she saw you with your Bible and yelling, she just cried and faded away." As he finished telling his story, all I could think about was if that was really his mom out there, or if he for some reason finally got hit with the realization his mother was gone. Since then I couldn't help but think, was that a demon? Was it a spirit trying to lure him to his death? Was it just him finally breaking down about his mother? Or was that really his mom? This is one of those times I'm not sure if I'd be happier with this being truly paranormal or being a trick of the mind. Either outcome sounding just as depressing. We still talk about that day here and there, but we tend to move off the topic rather quickly. I wouldn't say it's as traumatic as the demon room story, but it sure is a woeful memory. Hope you enjoyed reading Anon's. I'll be sure to share more stories if you like this one. I got plenty. Hey everyone, Demon Room Anon back. Decided to type out one more story before I go to sleep since this one has been on my mind again. This story, unlike the previous, aren't what you might call scary, but it is very much paranormal. Be about 18. My first real job out of high school was working for a call center in the town over. Should state that I live in a tiny Texas town and mostly all the jobs worth a shit are in the bigger town about 45 minutes out of our city. Get a small apartment out there and begin my job as an overnight customer service agent. Boring job, but paid really well, especially for a kid straight out of high school. Only problem was that I needed to walk from my job to my apartment. It wasn't a long walk, but it was across the parking lot of a giant plaza that was barely lit. Looked very eerie, but other than that it was fine. First few months seemed fine enough, no major occurrences or attempted muggings. One day around the 3-month mark I meet this really nice old guy. Quite obviously homeless, but he didn't seem worse for wear, if that makes sense. He's about 55. We don't talk for long or very often, but when we do we have small talk about the weather and how life is for us and so forth. The following is a compilation of things we talked about, but these were over a few weeks. Learn he used to be a jazz musician when he was younger and that he loved playing his saxophone in front of people. He tells me that he was really good at it too, wanted to try making it big one day. He even tells me he had a custom sax made with his name on it and everything. As any kid would, I asked him what happened. He told me that for all his talent he just couldn't say no to women. He loved being around them, loving them, a real playboy, he said. Then one day, as all good things do, it came to an end. Got some pretty girl pregnant. Said she didn't want him, but she sure wanted his money. Of which he didn't have much of. Didn't take long before he was drained dry of his assets. He even had to sell his custom sax. Dropped out of college. Couldn't even go back home since his parents moved to Italy in that time. All in all, not a fun time to be me. Goes on to tell me he just decided to start walking one day. All the clothes he could carry and any money he could sneak away from that woman. And he just started walking. He used to close to Colorado. How he ended up in Texas is beyond me. He told me stories about his travels and some spooky stuff he'll share sometime, but today is all about him. One day he just kinda stopped and decided to live where he stopped. Made a nice life for himself working small odd jobs for money. Slowly made friends with other homeless men and women. Was a happy guy all in all despite his faults. Decided one day to give him the nickname Eddie since he kinda looked like Eddie Van Halen. One day he asked me when my birthday was. He said he'd buy me a cake when that day came. I didn't think he meant it obviously, but I went along with the kind gesture. This went on for about a year until one day we had what at the time I didn't know was our last talk. Eddie had sat me down and began talking to me. He seemed pretty serious too. Told me about some things he wanted to get off his chest. Told me he's glad he met me, told me that I'm the son he wished he had. Said had we had met in another life he could see us being bandmates. He's saying all of this with a weird tone of finality. Like he needs to say it now or he won't be able to anymore. I told him that I was glad to meet him too. He looked at me with such a bittersweet smile and then he hugged me. Maybe any other day I would have hesitated since well he wasn't exactly clean, but today I didn't feel like I cared. Hell, even as I type this, it still hits me. After we hugged he just said he had to go somewhere. I nodded and waved goodbye. Before he fully left my side I stopped him and asked, "Hey, I know this is weird to ask now, but, what's your name?" "It's Edward, but you knew that already." For some reason I wasn't shocked to hear it, but it felt nice to know. A week or two passed and I don't see him again. I wonder where he went. One day my mom told me there was an accident, that a homeless guy got hit with a car and died. She told me the guy's name started with an E or something. My heart fucking dropped. Just free fall. My mom noticed my face sink when she told me, but she didn't pry further. The whole day I kinda just mourned silently. Come home and just let tears flow for a guy I barely knew, but felt a bond with. Fast forward to a week later, my birthday finally comes. No day off sadly, but had a fun dinner with my family. I begin to leave my shift and walk home. And that's when I saw it. A piece of cake on top of the bench. Eddie and I always spoke. I know that was probably just a piece of cake left around. That it wasn't even for me. I know that it's impossible, no beyond impossible for it to be what I thought it was. But seeing it there, it made breakdown. To be in the exact spot, the exact day, exactly as he said he would do. A piece of cake, even as I write this I can feel the tears running down my face. I shouldn't have eaten it, but I did. It felt like I had to. I had to do it for Eddie. Paranormal or not, ghost or not, spirit or not, hell maybe it wasn't even real. I ate it with tears in my eyes. Did he know he was going to die? Maybe he was already dead. Whatever it was. Eddie, if you can somehow read this on the other side, I miss our talks, and just know if we ever meet again I'll buy you a cake myself. As said before, this wasn't exactly a spooky or overly paranormal one, but it's one I felt still needed to be shared.